Welcome back to Driven by Dreams. Today's guest is Renuka Agarwal, founder and CEO of UpTrials. With a global upbringing and a career spanning LinkedIn, Viacom, and Tempest AI, she launched UpTrials in 2023 to tackle workforce challenges in clinical research. Having founded multiple startups, including a dance company, Renuka brings a strategic and innovative approach to solving complex problems. Let's dive in. Hi, Renuka. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you so much, Anishka.
Well, I'd love to start with learning a bit more about you.
Yeah, sure. So I actually grew up overseas in Asia. So Singapore is home for me. Grew up in Japan and Hong Kong as well, and then came to the US for university. So went to Columbia University for my undergrad. And then, career-wise, had a little bit of a random walk. So I actually started in investment banking. Then I moved over to media strategy at Viacom and LinkedIn. Then I went to University of Chicago Booth for my MBA. And that's really where I pivoted into healthcare. I really, went to business school because I wanted a career change and I wanted to work in an industry that I felt was intellectually stimulating, impactful on a personal level, and where I saw a lot of room for disruption and innovation. And I had friends who worked in healthcare who echoed that they felt those things. And I absolutely found it to be true. So since business school, I've worked at Genentech. I've worked as a life sciences consultant at ZS Associates, and I most recently worked as a senior director in clinical trials at Tempest AI. And that's where I discovered the challenges in clinical trials that my company UpTrials is focused on.
That's amazing. What inspired you to transition from investment banking and corporate roles to becoming a full-time entrepreneur?
I think that I've always had an entrepreneurial itch. Even through all of these roles that I've done in the past, I've always been what I call side hustling. So I've had three other startups that I've built on the side. One was a social networking app, one was a personal CRM, one was a medical device startup. So I've always had this itch to build something. I like building things, I like engaging with customers. I really like the challenges that come with strategizing around how you find product market fit, how you deliver long-term value for customers. And so it's always, I think, been a part of me, and I'm really happy that I'm finally able to do it full time.
Well, you mentioned your first couple of ventures. So what did you learn from that experience? What was one of the most useful things?
So one thing I will say is that the difference in doing a venture part-time versus full-time is very dramatic. So I think that a lot of the real pressures that you feel around running a company, getting revenue, delivering value for customers, for investors, for stakeholders, you really only feel those pressures when you're doing a venture full-time. And I think it's those pressures that really enable you to build towards success. So I think that's one big difference between prior ventures and now, is just the degree of responsibility and kind of the scope of challenges as well as the scope of growth that I experience. But what I did learn from those ventures is, one, it's incredibly important to find team members who you can work well with. Many people say that being in a co-founder relationship is like being in a marriage, and I think that that is very true. You experience a lot of very intense moments, discussions. And so I think from those experiences, I learned how critical it is to build a good team and find a good partner.
Thank you for sharing that advice. So you also emphasize the importance of good relationships in entrepreneurship. So could you share an example of where a relationship made a game-changing impact on your business?
Absolutely. So if I just look at the customers that we work with, it's really all been relationship driven. And it's almost been this domino effect of, I got introduced to one customer through someone in my network. Then that customer had a good experience with me and with the platform. And then they suggested our company UpTrials to another potential customer. And then that customer suggested UpTrials to another customer. And there have been multiple cases in the past where, even customers who still stay engaged with me and say, we don't have a need for UpTrials today, but we might want to consider in the future. The reason that I'm able to even keep those conversations going is, I think, because of the relationships that I have been able to build with those customers. So I genuinely believe that in life, and especially in business, everything is relationship driven. And so I think it's really important to represent yourself authentically, to be honest, to be respectful, to be credible, And I think that that results in long-term value.
Other than that honesty, how do you maintain and build those strong relationships? Is there anything else you do?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to be honest with your customers. I think that as an early stage company, I know myself and many of my fellow founders, you often feel this pressure to sell yourself. I mean, you are selling your company. Entrepreneurship is sales. And I think that there can be that appeal or tendency to oversell. But I think it's really important to be transparent. And I think that what has enabled us to sell, even at the early stages before when we had no product, is that we were very upfront about that with our customers. You know, we said, hey, we know you have this problem. We want to solve it for you. This is the current state of our product. If you invest in us, if you work with us, this is what we're building towards, and this is what we want to build for you, and we're open to your feedback along the way. I think that those conversations go a lot farther, because at the end of the day, your customers, if they understand and resonate with the problem you're solving for them, they want to see you be successful. They want to help you grow. They want the product to be something that works. And so I think the more honest you are with them, the better.
You mentioned that you lived in multiple countries growing up. So, seeing how companies operate in different locations, how did that influence your approach to business? Did it change anything?
So it's interesting because actually all of my professional experience has really been in the US with US based companies. But what I can tell you I've observed is I think differences in culture when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I think that one aspect that, of course, makes the US a wonderful place to build a company is just the amount of startup capital and startup infrastructure that exists in this country. I think that when I look at other countries around the world, I think everywhere there is a strong desire to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem, but different cultural norms around hierarchy, risk, I think these aspects can sometimes influence how risk-seeking companies are. So I think that that's maybe one difference I've seen, is just maybe risk appetite and sort of size of entrepreneurial infrastructure. I think that what I have really gained from being able to grow up in many different countries is just complete comfort with change. So in my life thus far, I've changed careers, I've changed locations, I'm constantly changing what we're doing in this company every day. But, you know, I think it's change that I'm very comfortable with, because I think change is just part of life for me. It's something that I got very used to growing up and has continued to be, I think, part of my ethos.
Did it also affect your ability to take risks? Did it make you more open to them?
I think I'm definitely more open to taking risks. I think that even for me, going full time on this venture was probably one of the biggest risks I've taken in my career. I think that what really helps when you're taking risks, so, is not only having an appetite for taking risks, but also having a really strong network to support you. So I'm super grateful to have my husband, who has been a huge source of support in my feeling like I could take this leap. And so I think it's really important for founders, you know, to make sure that you have that support system if you are making such a big decision, because it is very helpful.
Well, how do you balance rapid growth while maintaining quality and company culture?
Yeah, so thankfully we're still pretty small. And so when it comes to maintaining a strong company culture, since we're only about 5-6 employees, that's been relatively okay to manage. But I do think that company culture is something that you start from the get-go. And I think that if you don't set it when you have only 3 to 5 people, it becomes very difficult to set when you're an organization of 3,000 plus. So things that we've done to set a strong company culture, I think from the start, is one, we have a company handbook where we clearly define our values, our mission. We also outline just very clear company policies, right? So even though we're 5 people, we have effectively an HR handbook in place around how we operate, what leave employees can take, how they handle conflict resolution, how the company is there to support them. I hope that we never have to deal with any of those situations as a company, but I think it's really important to have a process around how to handle conflict and to articulate to employees that that is a priority for you. I want anybody who works with UpTrials to know that even though we're a small company, we value our employees and we have strong processes in place, even if we don't have a full-time HR person hired, for example.
Sounds like a great way to do it.
Thanks.
So, how do you ensure quality and compliance while scaling staffing issues?
UpTrials is an online AI-enabled staffing and operations platform for clinical research. So our core product is an AI-enabled talent marketplace that matches clinical research job seekers with roles in the industry that are posted by hospitals and clinics that run clinical trials, contract research organizations, and biotech companies. We are really helping to deliver quality candidates faster to our customers. So our main value proposition there is really time to fill. We're helping them fill roles, in about 2 weeks when you look at the time from when they post a job to when they start receiving candidates they can engage with, relative to the 5-month industry average. So that's our core product. And then what we're also doing is building additional features to automate manual tasks that clinical research teams do. Now, in terms of regulatory and compliance, we are fortunate, and this has also been a strategic decision, in that none of our platforms rely on patient data. So from a compliance and regulatory standpoint, we do not have any HIPAA concerns around patient safety data that we need to maintain. From our product standpoint, we do have all of the standard regulatory controls in place for software products. So for example, we do external penetration testing. We constantly test, how secure our web application is, how secure our servers are. So from that standpoint, we're compliant. And I think that as we continue to grow, just making sure that we are always working with vendors and companies that are compliant so that we don't put any of our software applications at risk is important. And just continuing to test for any hacks or penetration.
Thank you for explaining that. So, how has technology transformed the way clinical trial teams are recruited and managed? And as AI changes, how do you think UpTrials will also change their product?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because, like many other industries in clinical research, every conference you go to, everyone is talking about AI, and they're talking about how AI can change the industry, change how we work. Right now, most of the applications that the industry has been focused on have really been around information prioritization and document generation. And so that has been, I think, a lot of what discussion is focused on. And if you look at how our platform is using AI, we're using it basically similarly for information extraction. So we are parsing, candidate resumes for relevant information. We're parsing job descriptions for relevant information. And then we're using AI to match job seekers with relevant jobs, using both keywords as well as context that we can get, right, from other descriptions that are contained in that particular resume. So that's how we're using AI today. Nothing crazy, I would say, but very much kind of an application where matching has been something that we've been able to do for years. But the difference is with Gen AI, you can do it much more quickly and much more expansively. So you don't just have to match based on a specific word, but you can actually start to match based on context. So I think that that's pretty exciting. When I look at the future and how AI is going to continue to change clinical trials and how we want to stay relevant, in clinical trials, the most important part of any clinical trial is, of course, engaging with the patient. So making sure that they have all the answers that they need about the trial, that they feel supported in the trial, obviously dispensing any medication or administering any devices on them. All of that work will continue to be done by humans. At the end of the day, this is fundamentally a human and relationship-driven industry. However, in addition to patient care, there are many tasks that are still highly manual when you look at how a trial operates. So when you look at how patients are screened for and how they're scheduled in for visits, when you look at how learning and development is handled at the clinical trial team level. And so what I envision is that all of these manual tasks will be automated so that you need fewer people to do the work, and the people who are doing the work are only focused on taking care of patients. I think in that situation, you will have a world where patients are getting better care. Healthcare professionals are feeling less burned out because they don't have all of these manual, boring tasks that they didn't sign up to do. And you're just going to have a lot more efficiency and better results across the ecosystem. And the way that we're building towards that is, of course, by also finding ways that we can build automation for manual clinical research tasks, because our goal is in that future state to be the end-to-end partner, where a clinical trial employer is not only using UpTrials to hire, but they're now also using UpTrials to train and to empower their staff with different automation solutions.
I think you touched on a few of the challenges you faced, but what other challenges do you face when launching UpTrials in the clinical trials industry?
Yeah, so I mean, lots of challenges, of course, but that's why I have a job. But I think the first is making sure in the sales process, I think that you are targeting the right customers, and that you're also positioning your product in a way that resonates with them. Because what I learned early on is if you open the doors, wide open and say, we're AI and we're changing everything, people get scared. I think that there's a lot of excitement around AI, but I think there's a lot of fear too. I think there's fear from a lot of people that they're going to lose their jobs, or that these tools are somehow replacing them. And I think it's really important to address that challenge by really just emphasizing that all of these platforms, including UpTrials, are there to actually make jobs easier and not to replace those who are employed. So I think that was kind of one challenge early on that I recognized. I think the other one is just making sure that we can continue to maintain a white glove touch with our customers as we scale. So we're definitely at the point now where we have double the number of customers that we had last year. But we also recognize that a large part of our success to date has come from the fact that customers trust us. They like working with us. They like communicating with us. And so I think that as we get more and more customers, making sure that we strike that balance between, low touch, high touch is going to be important.
How do you build that trust between customers, between pharmaceutical companies, research sites?
Yeah. I think one, you need to, like I said, be honest. I think you also need to be credible. So, you need to go in and really help them understand that you understand their job. You understand their pains, their work to be done. You understand that hiring is only one small chunk of the large number of things they have to do. They're busy. You appreciate their time. And so I think just really making sure they understand that you get it and that you know the industry, you understand their job, I think is also very important. I think that builds trust. And so I think those are the most important things.
How do you incorporate customer feedback into your business strategy?
Constantly. So I keep a master strategy document, and anytime I hear an interesting insight, whether it's in, a piece of email feedback that I received from a customer, or it's something that I heard at a conference, or it's something that a customer directly told me in a meeting, I write it down there, and then once a week I go through that strategy document and I figure out what I actually need to action on. So not just insights, but what is the action from this insight that I need to take.
That's a great way to organize it.
Thanks. It still is kind of chaotic. I will never share this strategy document with anyone. I'm constantly working to find better ways, but this so far has enabled me to not lose that insight and be able to come back to it, so that I'm not derailed from the work that I have to do that day.
Well, could you share a podcast, a resource, or a book that has significantly impacted your career?
Oh, that's a good question. Ah, my gosh. Yes. So one book is called Social Business, and it's by Muhammad Yunus, who started the Grameen Bank. And I was really moved by his book because what he basically talks about is that to deliver social benefit, a corporate structure is still the most efficient way. And he talks about how a capitalist society can still deliver social value. And I think that is very important to me because everything that I do professionally has to have personal meaning for me. I think, on a personal level, I believe that the only reason that I have been fortunate to have what I have in life is because I have a responsibility to give that back. And I think that this book really resonates in sharing that, you can make a positive impact through a capitalist structure. So even though I am running a company, I obviously want to generate as much revenue as possible to drive value for my shareholders, for my investors, but I also can still drive positive societal value, and that's very much a core focus. I would say the other podcast that I listen to constantly is the BBC Global News podcast, and the connection to entrepreneurship is just that I think it's important to be a well-informed citizen, especially I think in the world that we live in today where political situations, economic situations are changing hourly. I think it's really important to have that context. It makes you a more educated, well-informed global citizen, which I think helps in your credibility, how you show up in conversations with other customers. And it also helps you sort of anticipate some of the challenges that, they might be feeling, whether it's in their professional life, in their personal life, and that just helps you better connect. So I think those two resources I would share.
Well, thank you for sharing them. It's been wonderful learning about your experiences, Renuka. So here's one final question. What's the best piece of advice you've received as an entrepreneur, and how has it shaped your journey?
Yes. I actually heard from the founder of a company called Quarksy. His name is Jayanth Kulkarni. I heard him speak at Columbia when I was an undergrad, I think in freshman year, so this is 2008. And he told us to go after the most unsexy problems because that is typically where there's a high unmet need, and you're going to find generally lower levels of competition. And I love the clinical trial industry. I would argue that it's definitely less sexy than maybe building in a different space. But again, I think that I have always gravitated towards these legacy industries that deliver a lot of value because they are areas where there are lots of unmet needs, where it requires a certain level of expertise to build effectively in. And I think that's ultimately where you can drive a lot of value. So that is a piece of advice that has always stuck with me. The other one that always sticks with me is my cousin's friend once gave me the acronym MAFA, which is mistaking action for achievement. And this is something I constantly evaluate. So for example, like many people, my inbox is a nightmare when I look at unread emails every day. And I might go through all of them and feel like I've achieved a lot when actually I haven't done anything to really drive the sales of my business. So I think it's really important to always hold ourselves accountable to what are just actions versus what are actions that are actually driving achievement.
Well, thank you so much, Renuka. This has been an amazing conversation, and I really enjoyed hearing your story.
Thank you so much, Anishka. I appreciate it.